In 17 heart-stopping seconds, Chief Justice John Roberts' voice sliced through the chamber branding, "Jasmine Crockett unqualified," in front of 42 million viewers. The room froze, cameras locked in, and you could almost hear the pulse of a nation pounding in disbelief. Then Jasmine's hand slid toward a golden-sealed envelope, like it held the fate of the court itself. What could be inside that's so explosive it might bring the highest judge in America to his knees? The red tally lights blinked on. 3 glowing dots locked onto the center of the chamber like silent snipers. The broadcast was live. Every breath, every blink now belonged to the nation. Above the Supreme Court seal, harsh lights cut across the mahogany walls. Shadows stretched long over the polished floor, making the space feel less like a hearing and more like an arena. The air carried that electric weight, the kind that comes before a storm. The rows were full. Lawmakers sat stiff in press suits, the press corps hunched over their notepads. The public gallery buzzed with people clutching the golden tickets to get in. At home, millions watched the same chyron, ethics and leadership in the Supreme Court, live. At the center sat Jasmine Crockett. She'd stood in many rooms, but never one like this. Civil rights attorney turned congresswoman she had built her career on, defending people who never made it into these halls. Her shoulders were squared, chin lifted, gaze locked forward. Every line of her posture said she wasn't just here for herself. She was here for the neighborhoods she came from, for the voices this room had never heard. Opposite her, Chief Justice John Roberts. Robe, flawless expression carved from stone. His reputation for calm hit a blade honed sharp by decades at the top. Those who'd faced him behind closed doors knew the truth. His strikes came quiet, clean, and devastating. And tonight, millions would be watching where the blade landed. Between them sat Maria Vega, investigative journalist and moderator. Her hands shuffled the question cards not out of nerves, but because she knew exactly how quickly this could turn into a televised storm. To Jasmine's right, Senator Alicia Grant tapped a pen in slow rhythm, eyes locked on Roberts. 3 seats back, Victor Hall, Roberts' former legal advisor, kept his gaze low, as if trying to disappear. Somewhere deep in the agenda, a single word waited like a coiled snake: qualification. It wouldn't come first. It wouldn't come gentle. When it struck, it would be meant to draw blood. And Jasmine had come ready for venom. The discussion on judicial reform was in full swing. Jasmine's voice was steady, laying out a plan to bring transparency to the court. Every word landed with precision, drawing nods from allies in the room. Then Roberts moved. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing just enough for the cameras to catch. And he cut her off mid-sentence. "Some of us earned our place here," he said, voice like a gavel striking marble. "Others are simply unqualified to weigh in on matters of this magnitude." The words hung in the air like a slap. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the reaction hit, breaths caught mid-air across the gallery. Whispers slicing through the stillness. The camera panned across, faces Maria Vega's eyes wide. Sen. Alicia Grant's jaw tightening. Victor Hall looking away. The moment felt heavier than the room could hold. Jasmine froze, not from shock, but from calculation. Behind her stillness, a storm gathered, quiet but unstoppable. She locked eyes with Roberts, not blinking, letting the tension stretch until it almost hurt to watch. On the bottom of TV screens across America, hashtags began to bloom: unqualified gate, stand with Jasmine. The clips hit social media before the echo of Roberts' words had even died in the chamber. Maria Vega tried to step in. "Let's keep the focus on," she began, voice firm but calm. It didn't matter. The moment had already broken free from her control. Roberts leaned back, his expression smooth, almost bored, but the faint curl at the corner of his mouth wasn't boredom. It was satisfaction. The audience shifted, some leaning forward, others crossing arms. The insult wasn't just about Jasmine. It was about who gets to speak in America's highest rooms and who doesn't. Jasmine's hand stayed flat on the table. Not a single paper moved. Her breathing was slow, measured. In that stillness, she was building something, a response sharp enough to cut deeper than any insult. Senator Grant's pen tapping stopped. She leaned in, her voice low but clear enough for the mics. "You don't have to take that," but Jasmine didn't flinch. Didn't speak. Not yet. The longer she waited, the more the tension grew, pressing down on every seat in the room. The broadcast feed zoomed in on her face, the slight lift of her chin, the glint in her eyes. Somewhere behind that look, a plan was already in motion, and every viewer at home could feel it. Whatever came next would be remembered. Jasmine didn't rush to answer. She reached forward and closed her folder with a soft, deliberate thud. The sound carried in the mic sharper than it should have been, like a quiet warning shot. Her eyes never left Robert, studying him as if he'd just played right into her hands. She had the words ready, sharp, dangerous, impossible to walk back from, but she kept them behind her teeth. The cameras were still adjusting the room, still processing his insult. Letting the silence stretch was its own kind of weapon, and she knew exactly how to use it. Leaning back in her chair, she folded her hands loosely in front of her. Outwardly calm, but her mind was moving fast, lining up her response like bullets in a chamber. When she finally pulled the trigger, she wanted the shot to echo across the country. Her thoughts slipped just for a moment to where it all started. A cramped kitchen in South Dallas, her mother's voice steady as she said, "You'll have to be twice as good to get half as far." She remembered the sting of that truth and the fire it lit in her, even as a teenager. She saw herself at 16, holding a debate trophy taller than her little brother, smiling through exhaustion. Years later, in a stiff graduation robe, walking past men who wouldn't meet her eyes because they didn't believe she belonged there. Nights spent in community halls with a second-hand laptop, fighting evictions, one family at a time. The images collided with another life, Roberts at Harvard, crisp suit name, opening doors before he even knocked. His path was paved smooth. Hers had been uphill in the rain. That difference wasn't just background. It was the reason they would never see the world the same way. Her fingers slipped under the desk and touched at the sealed envelope. The paper was cool edges, sharp enough to remind her what it held. She could end this here, turn the whole chamber upside down with one reveal. But that would be too easy. This wasn't about revenge. It was about the truth, and the truth deserved the perfect moment. Roberts looked over, perhaps sensing the weight in her stillness, but all she gave him was patience. The gallery was still holding its breath. On-screen hashtags climbed. Across America, people leaned toward their TVs. Jasmine's grip tightened on the envelope until it bit into her palm. She thought of her mother's words again and smiled. If you had the proof to shut down the most powerful judge in America, would you wait? Jasmine didn't speak right away. She just reached under the desk and set the golden sealed envelope on the polished wood. The gold shimmered under the lights, impossible to miss. All eyes shifted to it, like the room had suddenly found its center of gravity. She rested her hand on it for a beat, then looked straight at Roberts. "This document bears your signature, Chief Justice." Her voice was steady, the kind of calm that feels more dangerous than shouting. Roberts shifted in his seat. The movement was small, but the cameras caught everything. The slight pull at the corner of his mouth, the tightening of his jaw. The live feed zoomed in, and millions at home saw the change. Maria Vega leaned forward in her moderator's chair. "Do you wish to present it now, Congresswoman?" The question was formality. Everyone knew she wasn't asking for permission. Jasmine slid the envelope toward the center of the table. The gold seal glinted unbroken, a silent promise of whatever storm it might unleash. She didn't take her eyes off Roberts. Not when the envelope was picked up. Not when the moderator's hands tore the seal. The sound of paper tearing seemed to echo. Inside was a single-sheet cream-colored official letterhead gleaming under the lights. It was read aloud for the record, an appointment dated 5 years earlier, placing Jasmine Crockett on a federal legal advisory board. And at the bottom, in thick black ink, the signature, "John G. Roberts, Chief Justice of the United States." The flourish was unmistakable. The cameras cut between the letter, Roberts' face, and Jasmine's unflinching stare. The room reacted in a wave, a low murmur from the gallery reporters' pens, scratching fast, and the faint sound of a phone camera clicking somewhere in the crowd. Hashtags spiked instantly online, signed by Roberts' receipt on the table. Roberts reached for his water glass, taking a slow sip. It didn't hide the way his shoulders stiffened. Jasmine sat back in her chair, hands folded again, as if the letter wasn't even her strongest card. Maria's voice broke the silence. "Chief Justice, is this your signature?" The mic caught the faintest pause before his answer. And in that pause, everyone watching knew this was only the beginning. The signature hit like a gunshot. A wave of breathless shock swept through the chamber, sharp and sudden, bouncing off the marble walls. The energy in the room shifted as if everyone had just realized they were watching history happen live. Maria Vega leaned in toward the letter, her voice low but clear. "Let's get a close-up on this." One of the camera operators zoomed tight, filling every screen in America with Roberts' unmistakable signature. From the second row, Senator Alicia Grant stood, her voice cut through the noise. "So, she was qualified enough then." The words landed like a second punch, pulling eyes back to Roberts. On the live broadcast, the feed split. One side showed the document being read aloud. The other showed Roberts trying to compose himself, jaw-tight eyes, blinking faster than usual. Viewers didn't need a law degree to read the discomfort on his face. In the gallery, the murmur grew louder. Phones were out, fingers flying. Hashtags multiplied by the second checkmate, Roberts, Ate, his own words, receipt, justice. Some posts were already racking up thousands of shares before the letter had even been folded back into its sleeve. Jasmine didn't move. She sat still watching him, letting the weight of the moment sink in. It wasn't just the paper on the desk, it was the fact that it came from his own hand. A hand that, now in front of millions, couldn't take it back. Maria continued reading the letter, every line louder than the last. Each word was another nail in the coffin of his earlier insult. The formal language, the praise for her expertise, the official nature of the appointment, it was all there, black and white. Robert shifted again, crossing his legs, then uncrossing them. His hand brushed the edge of his robe, a nervous tell for anyone watching closely. The cameras caught it all, and the internet was already looping it into GIFs. When Maria finished, the chamber didn't fall silent. It hummed with a different kind of tension, not anticipation but recognition. The first blow had landed clean and public. Jasmine finally spoke, her voice calm as ever. "I guess the question now is, Chief Justice, what changed?" And just like that, the temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. Roberts cleared his throat, leaning toward the mic. It was a ceremonial signature, he said, each word carefully measured. "I didn't personally review her record." The explanation floated in the air, thin and brittle. He spoke like someone tossing a lifeline, hoping no one noticed it was frayed. But the damage was already done, and everyone in the room knew it. Jasmine tilted her head, a slow smile tugging at her lips. It wasn't the smile of someone amused. It was the smile of someone holding the next card, deciding when to play it. She didn't rush in to argue. She just let the silence build around him, letting his words echo and crumble on their own. The longer she waited, the more people started to question his version without her saying a thing. In the third row, Victor Hall shifted in his seat. His eyes darted toward Jasmine, then to the letter, still on the desk. His fingers tapped against his knee, nervous, deliberate. The cameras caught it. Viewers at home didn't know who he was yet, but they'd remember the face. The man who seemed to know something he shouldn't. Roberts pressed on, trying to steer the conversation away. "We sign hundreds of such documents each year. It's impossible to recall every name." His tone had shifted, less confident, more defensive. Maria Vega raised an eyebrow. "Even when the name belongs to someone you just called unqualified?" The gallery stirred at that, a low rumble of reaction. Jasmine leaned forward now, her voice calm but cutting. "Interesting, because I remember exactly where I was the day you signed it." Her eyes never left his. He looked back at her, and for the first time that night, something flickered, not anger, not arrogance, but uncertainty. Jasmine saw it, and so did millions of people watching. Victor Hall's legs stopped bouncing. He sat very still, like someone bracing for their name to be called. And in a way, it already had been. Jasmine glanced at the audience, then back at Roberts. Sometimes, she said softly, people sign things they wish they hadn't. She let that hang for a heartbeat. "What would you do if the man trying to destroy you just handed you the weapon?" Jasmine didn't break eye contact with Roberts. Her voice came steady, almost casual. "I'd like to call Victor Hall." The air in the chamber shifted. Gasps rippled through the gallery. A few chairs creaked as people leaned forward. The camera cut to Roberts, catching the sudden tightening around his mouth, the kind of frown that happens when someone sees a trap spring shut. Maria Vega hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. "Mr. Hall, please step forward." All eyes turned to the man in the third row. Victor rose slowly, buttoning his jacket like a man walking into a storm he'd seen coming for years. His reputation was well known, a sharp legal mind, former advisor to Roberts, and not the type to waste words. The mics followed him as he crossed the room. He took the stand, right hand raised for the oath. The room fell so quiet you could hear the rustle of his sleeve as he lowered it. Mr. Hall, Jasmine began, "Were you present when Chief Justice Roberts approved my appointment to the Federal Legal Advisory Board?" Her tone was crisp, every syllable measured. Victor's gaze flicked briefly toward Roberts, then back to Jasmine. "Yes," he said. One word steady, and it landed like a hammer on the table. Maria leaned forward. "Can you tell us what happened in that meeting?" Victor clasped his hands in front of him. "The Chief Justice personally recommended you for the role. He spoke at length about your qualifications and your potential to bring fresh perspective to the board." A ripple moved through the gallery, shock, disbelief, satisfaction, all tangled together. On the split-screen broadcast, Roberts' face stayed still, but his eyes told a different story. Jasmine let the silence hang for a moment, letting the words settle where they needed to. Then she nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Victor didn't look away from her. "I remember," he added, "because it was the first time I'd heard him speak so strongly in support of someone from outside his usual circle." That last line sent a fresh wave of murmurs through the room. The camera cut back to Jasmine, her expression unreadable. But her eyes were already on the next move. And millions watching could feel it. This was about to get even messier. Victor shifted slightly in his seat, the kind of movement that says the next words will change everything. His voice stayed calm, but there was a weight to it. "In that meeting, Chief Justice Roberts called Congresswoman Crockett one of the most capable legal minds in the country." The gallery reacted instantly. A few gasps escaped, followed by the low hum of people trying to process what they'd just heard. The camera swung to Roberts, his expression tight, but his eyes already betraying a flash of discomfort. Maria Vega leaned forward. "Mr. Hall, are you certain about that phrasing?" Victor didn't flinch. "I wrote it down word for word. And I brought those notes with me today." His hand reached into his briefcase, pulling out a worn leather notebook. The pages fell open to a dated entry. The ink was neat, the handwriting deliberate. At the top, the date 5 years ago. Below it, a short but damning sentence highlighted in blue. "One of the most capable legal minds in the country, J.G. Roberts." Maria took the notebook, glancing at the corners stamped with an official authentication seal. "These notes have been verified," "Yes," Victor replied, "by an independent document examiner, and they match the calendar logs of the Chief Justice's office for that day." The camera cut back to Roberts. The color in his face had drained, leaving a pale contrast against the black of his robe. He sat back, shoulders rigid, hands clasped tighter than before. In the gallery, reporters scribbled furiously. A producer in the media section gestured wildly to a cameraman, signaling to stay locked on Roberts' reaction. Jasmine stayed quiet, her gaze steady on the Chief Justice. She didn't need to speak, the evidence was speaking for her. Every word from Victor was another brick added to the wall closing in around him. Victor's voice didn't waver. He didn't just sign her appointment, he fought for it, and he made sure everyone in that room knew exactly why. The quiet afterward pressed down like weight, making people hold their breath without even noticing. Roberts didn't move, and somewhere on millions of screens, viewers were leaning closer, waiting for what Jasmine would do with this bomb now that it had landed. The room exploded. Voices rose all at once, gasps, shouts, the scrape of chairs, as people half stood to see better. It wasn't just noise, it was the sound of a chamber losing its grip on order. Maria Vega's voice cut in over the chaos. "Please, everyone, settle down." She raised a hand toward the gallery, but her eyes kept darting between the letter Victor Hall and Roberts. Phones were up everywhere. Camera flashes popped like lightning. In seconds, the hashtags were already alive online. "Receipts don't lie." "Victor speaks." Posts poured in with screenshots of Roberts' drained face side by side with the quote from Victor's notes. Roberts shifted forward, pressing the mic button. "I request a recess," he said. His tone clipped the control he'd held all night, starting to fray. But Maria didn't even look at him. "Request denied, Chief Justice," she replied, firm and final. "The hearing will proceed." A murmur of approval rippled through the audience, and the tension in Roberts' jaw deepened. Reporters at the back whispered furiously into headsets, feeding the frenzy to newsrooms across the country. On split screens at home, viewers watched the live chaos on one side and a storm of tweets on the other. The narrative was writing itself in real time. Jasmine stayed still, her hands folded in front of her. But her silence wasn't retreat, it was control. Every second Roberts sat there under the weight of Victor's testimony was another second the public saw who really held the advantage. Victor glanced toward her, a small nod that said his part was done. Now the rest was in her hands. The hum of the gallery began to quiet, but the energy stayed sharp like the air before another clap of thunder. Roberts leaned back, eyes scanning the room. His expression had shifted, no longer just defensive, but calculating. It was the look of a man already thinking 2 moves ahead, even as he took hits. And Jasmine noticed. She knew this fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If the truth is out, why does the fight feel far from over? The gallery was still buzzing when Jasmine leaned toward her mic. Her tone was calm, but her eyes had the focus of someone about to draw a much bigger map. This isn't an isolated moment, she began. It's a pattern. She tapped a button on the desk. Behind her, the screen lit up with a chart, bar graphs, and case names stacked like cold evidence. In the past 15 years, Chief Justice Roberts has voted against candidates from underrepresented backgrounds for federal positions. 78% of the time. The numbers hit like a body blow. The crowd shifted in their seats, murmurs cutting through the air. Jasmine pointed to specific cases: a Latina judge blocked from a federal bench, a civil rights attorney denied a key appointment, a Native American legal scholar passed over without explanation. With each example, the screen filled with headlines and vote tallies. The names weren't just ink on a page, they were stories, lives altered by decisions made far from the people they'd affect most. Maria Vega glanced at the screen, her face tightening as she read the statistics aloud. These are official records, Jasmine confirmed. Every one of them linked to a vote cast by Chief Justice Roberts. Then the montage began. Photos of the people behind the numbers. The rejected candidates faded in one by one. Their eyes told the story: disappointment, frustration, but also defiance. The last image froze on the screen, an African-American judge from Georgia, her hands resting on a stack of community petitions she'd never get to act on. The caption under her picture read, "Denied 2019, 52-47 vote." Jasmine let the silence hang, giving the faces time to sink in. These aren't statistics. They're the cost of a system that decides who belongs in the room before they even knock. In the gallery, you could hear the slow intake of breath from people who hadn't expected the fight to get this personal. On social media, a new hashtag appeared: pattern of power. Roberts didn't move, but his gaze stayed fixed on the table in front of him. Jasmine knew he'd recognize every one of those names because he'd been in the room when each decision was made, and now so was the rest of the country. Jasmine let the last image on the screen fade to black. Then she leaned in, her voice low but unshakable. And here's where it connects to tonight. She glanced at Roberts. When you called me unqualified, you weren't just talking to me. You were talking to every single person who's been told they don't belong before they even walk in the door. Her hand moved to a single folded page on the desk. She lifted it carefully, the paper trembling just slightly under the lights. This, she said, is a letter I received last night. She unfolded it, smoothing the creases with deliberate care. It's from a second-year black law student in Atlanta. He watched your comment, Chief Justice. And this is what he wrote. Her voice shifted as she read, becoming the student's voice. When you said she was unqualified, I heard you telling me I'll never be enough. I've been thinking of quitting. I can't imagine fighting my way into a system that already decided I don't belong. The room felt vacuumed of sound. Even the shuffle of papers froze. You could almost hear the collective breath being held. Jasmine lowered the page slightly. He's not alone. Every one of those names I showed you tonight, they've all heard the same thing in one form or another. And every time it's said, another door closes for someone who hasn't even gotten to knock yet. Her eyes swept across the room, pausing on Roberts. You have power, Chief Justice. Enough to shape the law, enough to shape lives. And when you use that power to shut people out, it doesn't just hurt careers. It hurts the country. On the live feed, the camera caught the stillness in the gallery. Viewers at home could see the way even the reporters had stopped writing. The weight of the words hung heavy, impossible to shake. Jasmine placed the letter down flat on the desk. So no, this isn't about one insult. It's about a culture that decides worth based on comfort, not capability. And for the first time all night, Roberts looked away. Jasmine let the letter rest on the desk, but her eyes stayed locked on Roberts. Her voice rose just enough to carry to the farthest row. This isn't just about me, it's about every door slammed in someone's face for where they come from. She didn't look away. It's about the student who wonders if the fight is worth it. The lawyer who's told to wait their turn. The judge who never even gets considered because their name doesn't fit the mold. A murmur started in the back row of the gallery. One person said it first, quiet but clear. Qualified, another picked it up, then another. Within seconds, the room was alive. The chant rolled forward like a wave filling the chamber. Qualified, qualified, qualified. The rhythm echoed against the walls, impossible to ignore. On the live broadcast, the split screen showed both the chanting crowd and the comment section online. Thousands of messages pouring in, all repeating the same word. It wasn't just a slogan now. It was a verdict. Maria Vega tried to call for order, but even she couldn't hide the smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. She knew a moment like this couldn't be manufactured. It had to be earned. Jasmine stood letting the chant wash over her. She didn't shout to be heard. She waited until the noise began to dip, then spoke into the quiet that followed. You can insult me, you can doubt me, but you will not define me, and you will not define anyone who refuses to let this door stay shut. Her voice was firm, carrying a weight that made people sit up straighter. The chant started again, louder this time. Phones in the audience were held high, streaming the moment live. Across the country, living rooms echoed with the same word. Roberts sat motionless, the noise pressing in on him from every direction. The robe that once gave him authority now felt like armor that didn't fit. Jasmine's gaze swept the room one last time. If this is the system at its most powerful, can it be changed? The chant of qualified still echoed when Jasmine reached under the desk for a second envelope. This one wasn't gold, no ornate seal, just plain white ordinary to anyone else. But the way she placed it on the table made the cameras lean in as if it were a live grenade. She let her fingertips rest on it, then looked straight at Roberts. Chief Justice, you've had a lot to say about my qualifications tonight. Let's read what you had to say when you thought no one was watching. The noise in the room dropped to nothing. Even the gallery moments ago, loud with chanting, seemed to freeze. Maria Vega reached forward, sliding the envelope toward her as though it were fragile. The paper tore with a crisp sound that felt louder than it should. Inside, a memo printed on an official letterhead, Office of the Chief Justice. The emblem at the top glinted under the lights. Maria's voice was clear, steady. Congresswoman Crockett has demonstrated exceptional leadership with the ability to unite diverse perspectives. I urge colleagues to support her initiatives as they align with our long-term goals. A ripple went through the chamber, gasps, low murmurs, the metallic click of cameras firing in rapid bursts. The final page held not just Robert's signature, but 3 others from his senior staff, each one authenticated with matching verification stamps. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. This memo circulated internally 3 years ago, verified by independent examiners, and it came directly from your office. The split-screen broadcast showed Roberts' face beside the memo. His features stayed set, but the faintest flicker in his eyes betrayed a crack in the wall. In the gallery, someone whispered, "That's it. Game over." The phrase rippled forward, caught by a microphone, and instantly hit social media. Screens everywhere lit up with images of the memo captions, already writing themselves, "Receipts win." Jasmine's hands pressed flat against the table. So which is it, Chief Justice? Was I unqualified then? Or are you just hoping no one remembers this? The question didn't just hang in the air. It pinned him there in front of millions with nowhere left to move. Roberts cleared his throat, leaning toward the mic. That memo was drafted by staff. It doesn't... The words came out halting, thin, as if even he didn't believe them. The noise in the chamber swelled before he could finish. Some laughed, others shouted over him. The chant returned sharper now, cutting through his voice. Qualified, qualified. Maria Vega raised her hand, but the crowd didn't stop. She glanced toward the cameras, her expression caught between control and disbelief. The broadcast audio struggled to catch Roberts' words under the roar. He tried again, leaning forward, voice straining. I never intended, but the rest vanished beneath a wave of applause from Jasmine's side of the gallery. Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. The moment was feeding itself now, the public taking the wheel. Every attempt Roberts made to claw back control only pushed him deeper into the corner. Maria tapped her mic twice, the sound popping through the speakers. "Order, please." The room settled slightly, but the undercurrent was still there, buzzing alive. She turned back to Roberts, her tone crisp. "Chief Justice, it seems America has made its judgment." The line landed like a gavel. Short, final, irrevocable. The camera zoomed tight on Roberts's face, his jaw-set eyes fixed on the table. Not in thought, in retreat, a man calculating how to survive the aftermath, not the moment. Jasmine's gaze stayed on him, unreadable but steady. She knew the fight wasn't just about humiliating him here. It was about what came next when the headlines hit and the recordings played on loop. In the gallery, someone shouted, "We hear you, Jasmine." The crowd murmured in agreement, the kind of organic endorsement no campaign could buy. Online, the clip of Maria's line was already trending, cut and recut into thousands of posts. Roberts finally leaned back, exhaling through his nose. He didn't reach for the mic again. For the first time all night, he looked less like the Chief Justice of the United States and more like a man who knew the court of public opinion had already ruled. The chamber was still humming from Maria Vega's final line when Jasmine rose from her seat. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Every head in the room turned toward her as if pulled by gravity. She placed both hands on the table, leaning into the mic. Her voice was steady, warm but unyielding. "Your worth is not defined by those afraid of your power. Stand, speak, prove them wrong." The words landed with a weight that wasn't just for the people in that room. They were for the student in Atlanta, for the rejected judges, for every viewer sitting at home, fists clenched, thinking about the doors that had been shut in their faces. Jasmine straightened, gathering her papers with calm precision. She didn't look at Roberts again, not out of dismissal, but because he was no longer the center of the story. The crowd was. The future was. The first person stood to follow her, then another. Soon, half the gallery was on its feet, moving as she moved. Cameras caught the ripple of motion, the sound of footsteps echoing off marble. The chant started again, but softer this time, qualified like a promise instead of a fight. Jasmine walked through the aisle, the space parting for her, without a single word. Outside the chamber, daylight spilled across the steps. She paused for a moment at the top, turning slightly as the crowd poured out behind her. Phones were up, capturing every second. She didn't wave. She didn't smile for the cameras. She just kept walking, the crowd following like a tide she'd set in motion. And somewhere behind them, Robert stayed seated alone in a room that felt emptier than ever. What would you do if the truth could topple? The untouchable true strength doesn't come from titles or the chair you sit in. It comes from standing tall when you're underestimated, from speaking the truth, even when it unsettles the powerful. When Jasmine walked out of that chamber, she didn't just defend her own honor. She opened a door for everyone who's ever been turned away because of where they came from. And you, if one day you had the chance to change how the world defines worthy, would you step through that door? If this story struck a chord, don't just scroll past. Like, share, and subscribe to Hill Insights, where standing up to power becomes a spark for change and every voice matters. Tap the bell, because the next story won't just uncover the truth. It might challenge the way we see justice itself. Which moment tonight hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments. Let's not just witness history, let's write it together. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching.